Welcome to the H-Files, the new series of the Hands-On Business podcast, where we dive deep into the world of healthcare leadership and the unique challenges facing small to medium-sized healthcare businesses. I'm Hakeem Adebiyi, and after years of helping businesses grow in various industries, I'm excited to focus on the area that I know the best, healthcare, one of the most dynamic and impactful sectors in the world today. In this series, we're going to explore what it takes to lead and grow in healthcare, from navigating the complexities of regulation and innovation to overcoming the everyday hurdles of building a sustainable business in this fast-paced environment. Each episode will feature real-world insights, expert interviews, and actionable strategies that can help you push your healthcare business forward. So whether you're a leader in the space or an entrepreneur ready to break into it, the H-Files is here to give you the edge. So, one of the biggest challenges I see in healthcare leadership is this: the constant tug of war between doing good and doing well. You start a healthcare business generally to make a difference. You want to improve care, outcomes, and lives. But before long, you're knee-deep in spreadsheets, staff shortages, rising costs, and the mission can start to feel like a luxury that you actually can't afford. But what if the two could reinforce each other instead of conflicting with each other? And what if your purpose actually drove your profitability? Now, that's what we're exploring today with Amrit Dhaliwal, CEO of Walfinch, who's built one of the UK's most respected home care brands by balancing compassion with commercial discipline. And we're going to be talking about the mindset, the model, and leadership that make that possible. So delighted to have you on, Amrit. Really welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here, Kim.
My pleasure. So we're going to jump straight in. Obviously, when you were younger, employment-wise, you did lots of different things, tea rooms, restaurants, etc. Just tell me how you got into be running, such a massive care home from a tea room.
So I'm involved in domiciliary care, which is home care.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of the opposite of care homes. But care homes play an important part in the journey because my wife's family have nursing homes and care homes. And it was my wife, my then girlfriend, recommended that she thinks I'd be good at this home care malark. And I thought, I'll give it a go. And I bought a franchise. And that was back in 2012. April 13, I had made my decision of, well, this is it. This is what I've got to do. This is my 20-year mission. I've got to, transform home care and transform franchising in the UK.
And so why did that become your mission? Because you just said that once you started doing it, you decided this is it. What was it about home care that made you think this is it?
Well, I think, the big thing for me was simply that it was all just very archaic. The systems were archaic. We had filing cabinets wall to wall. It was madness to me. And I thought we must be the only industry in the world that's still so far behind technology. And then as a franchisee, I just realized that actually the thing that was really important to me was coaching others and coaching them for success and really helping people thrive through entrepreneurship. And I thought, well, I think I can do that, because I don't think we've quite got that model for home care in franchising yet, and certainly in the UK, where it's sort of plug and play. And that's kind of been my mission to build.
And then so in terms of like what I said in the intro, did you find that there was a challenge between, having that mission of coaching for success and transforming that industry, and the balance with margin and actually performance in terms of cash performance and financial performance?
I mean, I think that there's always that dichotomy, certainly in the UK, in the way that the work is commissioned. But I very much feel like, money and profit should not be a dirty word, and that we should be developing profit and building more of it. We cannot have a good quality business that is not also profitable. And I really believe that, I think you need to have both. And I think it's okay. And actually, it's the entrepreneurs within the social care sector that prop up the market. It's not actually the government in many ways. It is the entrepreneurs behind it, and they do also deserve shareholder value.
And why do you think it is that? Because I think that, I'm not going to say people necessarily think it's a dirty word, but a lot of people, when they're in a purpose-driven sector like home care, like other healthcare businesses, think, I don't really want to talk about the profit, because it should all be about the patients and it should all be about the person who's using the service, which it should be. But if you don't have the profit, you can't do what you were talking about. You can't coach people, you can't train people, you can't actually improve your service. So why do you think there is a misunderstanding in purpose-driven sectors around profit?
I think it's the way that it's marketed. I think people will look in and say, well, that is essentially charity type of business, effectively.
And how would you define your leadership philosophy?
That's a really lovely question. And I think my leadership philosophy is, very much defined around long-term vision and breaking down your 10-year goal to say, this is my 10-year goal over here. And as a result of that, this is what I need to do tomorrow. And I think often we don't have those two things connected. And that is where the problem will come in.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I want to come on to the problems in a minute. But have your vision evolved since you started at Walfinch, or is it still 10-year vision, 20-year vision? Because you mentioned a 20-year vision at the outset. Is that still the same, or is it evolved and it's changing?
Yeah, I think my 10-year vision is actually very much the same. We want to get to 200 million in network revenue. We want to get to 200 plus locations. We also want to break the international market. And that vision hasn't really changed. I suppose what has changed is that I've got some more detail around that. Kind of understand that what we're really trying to do with the care side of it is to change the way aging is perceived. I've recently become an ambassador for the Royal Osteoporosis Society. We're talking a lot about longevity and bone health and muscle mass and, all of these things that actually, as a sector, we haven't really ever been talking about before, frankly. So I'm like, well, let's change the conversation. Why can't we talk about thriving in an older age? Why can't we talk about romances at 90? Why can't we change the way we think about the whole thing?
Okay, yeah, and so how do you go about that? Because obviously that's I'm not going to say it's the holy grail, but generally in any business, you don't just want to be selling a product or selling a service. You want to be actually changing things and looking at what the factors outside of that business that you can also influence, which then enhance the quality of your offering. So how would you say that's changed? Because one of the things you said is that your vision was to transform franchising and home care. So how, if when you started you were sort of like a level 1 on that journey, and level 10 is the panacea of everything, where would you say you are on that journey?
I'm very much of the view that it's all about growth mindset, and it's all about you keep on learning. As soon as I think I know everything, that means I'm done. It's because there's always much to learn. So I always go into all situations, whether that's with other CEOs of bigger brands or whether that's with the cleaner. I go in thinking, what can I learn from this scenario? Because I can always learn something. So where I would be on that journey is a 3, and it's kind of saying, well, you've got so much to learn. I mean, heck, yeah. How many people truly could talk to us about this? I was watching a masterclass yesterday on, Peter Attia's work in longevity, and it just got me thinking about, well, okay, gosh, I've read his book recently, Outlive, and I thought that was really intriguing. I'm thinking, how do we pull that into what we're doing and developing and so on? There's just so much there. There's so much richness there.
And then and on that basis, because obviously one of the things you said is obviously your goals are obviously financial as well as looking at how you develop the business. So how do you scale? I always say how do you scale quickly, but how do you scale without diluting compassion and or quality, which are kind of one and the same thing, to be honest, when it comes to home care?
Yeah, I think that actually I'd say that it's really around having a strict and strong value set. So I follow the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and I think that is a really interesting way to work and develop your business. What EOS does is it sets out your values and you kind of really figure out, well, what are my values for my business? It sets out that 10-year vision, the 3-year goals, 1 month, 1 quarter, and so on. And I think the way to not dilute it all is to make decisions that are aligned with your values. And so if there is a decision here that will make lots of money but will take me away from my 10-year goal and vision and also doesn't fit with my values, it can't be the right decision.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, actually. I think value-driven businesses are probably the ones that stay the course. I'm not saying that if you haven't got very clear values, you're not going to stay the course. But I think that values do anchor a business, and then it becomes important in terms of recruitment. Because I mean, I know you talk about a lot in terms of coaching and the right people. If you haven't got values, how do you then get people in the business that have the same value set, which then drive the values of the business? I think lots of people think that values are about, well, the CEO's got these values and they're written up on the wall, but we just recruit willy-nilly and we recruit what we consider to be the best people for the job. To me, a lot of the time, the best people for the job are the people who've got the right values. Because
Yes.
you can pretty much train most skills, but it's very difficult to train values or attitude into a person. They're generally of that way, but
Yep.
not.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. And yeah, I think what you just said there, what really stood out was that having decisions that then align with those values as well, because that completely embeds it within a business. And that, you know, if the questions that you're asking are, well, does this actually fit, as you said, with our 10-year vision, and does it fit with our values? You pretty much stay on the right path, and everybody's moving in the right direction, which is the holy grail again, really, of most businesses. Now, one of the things you did mention earlier, you saying, well, you know, this is the way I have a vision, this is my value set, and if I don't do that, then you could have some problems. What would you say would be some of the problems you think that you would face or you have faced when you haven't stuck to that?
Yeah, I think that really easy places to test this is in your recruitment. And, you know, any time where I have recruited someone over the years where I think they're not really right, but I am slightly desperate right now, you know, it's always blown up in my face. And actually, I've now learned to say, well, okay, I'll just be in pain longer until I find someone that aligns with the value set. And, you know, and that actually might even mean that you are speaking to people that are not in the market, and that might actually take years, because if they're people that are value driven people and they align with you, well, actually they're probably doing something meaningful in the first place, actually. And so that might take many years to kind of court them out of that role and so on. So I think it's really understanding that this is not a recruiter problem, right? This is a time issue. This is really thinking about things, you know?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I say, and I was one of my last podcasts was with an actual recruiter, and I've always said, recruit in haste, repent at leisure, because you
Yes.
know we've all been there where you just want to fill a hole because of the amount of work that has to get through. Very rarely does it work out, and it actually just leads to more pain, and then you have another vacancy, and you've disrupted the team flow as well. I think that's very, very sensible advice. And then what would you say? Nothing ever goes smoothly all the time. Do you have like early warning signs or signals that give you an idea if you are moving off that value system or you are moving away from your 10-year plan? What's your advice to ensure that people can stay strict on what they're trying to deliver?
I think it's really making everything fit into some sort of scorecard. You know, 5 or 6 things that you look at on a weekly basis that then tell you, you know, where am I, what's going on, what's the measure of the business. I think it's also really important to measure everything and say, well, okay, you know, to the best of your ability, like, what can I actually measure in this particular scenario? Looking at that, then having a really more formal sit down on a quarterly basis and saying, well, okay, what does this look like? Does this still fit with the 10-year goal? Does it still fit with what we're up to in our mission? And if it doesn't, then what do I need to pivot, you know? And also just making sure that you've got the right people surrounding you that will have honest and open conversations, because I think often people don't, and that then becomes problematic.
Excellent. In terms of, because I know the EOS recommends meeting once a week, and then, as you said, having more formal quarterly, etc. So, in terms of, what's your view on I don't want to call it a meetings culture, but in terms of how to effectively run meetings so that you're driving that vision and you're driving those values, as opposed to just, you know, you'll have seen it in some businesses, they're having meetings, but they're just very unproductive and people dread going into the meetings. Nothing's really achieved. How do you make sure that those meetings where you are looking at those key things are actually valuable meetings for everyone involved?
So one of the things that we do is something called a level 10 meeting, again, part of the EOS. So it's a 90-minute meeting. It's broken into various different segments. One of the segments is talking about kind of the good news stories. It goes into, that. It goes into the numbers. It goes into the issues list, and you just keep breaking down through the whole thing. But the whole point is to kind of get into an issue, deal with an issue, fix the issue, move on from the issue. I think where meetings go wrong, and then score the meeting, the quality of the meeting at the end of it. Often where things go wrong is where you break it down kind of halfway through.
Yes, I definitely think that's the case. And when people, and I think the good thing about a level 10 meeting, and if you haven't read the book, I'm actually going to put a link to the book about the EOS in the link, because we're talking about things and some people are going to be thinking, what the hell are they talking about? But I think the good thing about a level 10 meeting is that everybody is clear on what the objectives are for that meeting, what they're going to be doing in that meeting, what their responsibilities in that meeting, and then, as you said, they then score it. So if you're getting a low score, then you can tell that there are people in that meeting who didn't find it as useful as it should have been. So I think that's really, really useful. And then in your organization, you've got values. Obviously, they're mission-driven businesses. It's all about care. How do you train your staff and leaders to combine the empathy that's required with the accountability?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think the way that you combine that is quite simply, you need to train your team. First of all, you need to hire the right people. Second of all, you need to train the right people in order to ensure that they understand your operating system. So if it is something like the level 10 or EOS, do they get it? Do they know how to make good quality, high level decisions? And if they don't have that framework, that's where the problem lies. And I think, often as a business owner or a CEO or a founder, whatever, you kind of retain all of this power, and that's a problem. I was talking to one of my key players today and saying, well, okay, how much more could I delegate down and say, well, how much higher could you make your kind of sign-off stages, if you see what I mean? And therefore, we then need to come up with a framework on how would I respond to that said issue and really get into that whole piece, because actually that's where often the game is.
Yeah, no, 100%. And just extending out again in terms of, because that's you're almost embedding a culture into the business. And as you said, the EOS is effectively, you've got an operating system that's going across the whole of the business. And in a franchise model, whilst not everyone has a franchise model, one of the challenges that people often have in business is, I might start small and I've got a small group around me. I'm running the business, I've got my values, I'm working with people. But as it starts to get bigger and more disparate, so you're moving and you get more franchisees, how do you help those franchise owners embody the Walfinch mission and then run a viable business? And then how do you then manage that so that actually it's consistent across the franchises, as opposed to, well, that franchisee is kind of on the values, value, mission, vision and values with you, but that one slightly doesn't get it or isn't really implemented. How do you keep a consistency?
Yeah, I think first point is that you need to recruit the right people. And you need to make sure that there is an alignment with the people that you're taking on that journey with you. And if you're not saying no a lot, you probably are not, right? The second thing is that it is then about breaking things down into numbers, tracking those numbers across the network and saying, right, okay, here we go. And really understanding what those numbers look like, then looking at them on a really frequent basis as yourself as a franchisor. The third thing I'd say is really about then breaking that down into behavior and saying, well, okay, well, what are the value sets, and what are the behaviors behind that? And then, how do I process that behavior? Is it through technology? Is it through the paperwork? Is it through language? Having joint language is very powerful. And really sort of how do I cascade that down? And then how do I reward that behavior? Because I think the thing that you talk about is the thing that is important. So, what are the awards about? What is the things that are coming up in your newsletters? What are you talking about on podcasts and so on? It's really about then getting right into that and saying, well, okay, this is what's important because, this is what we talk about on a really regular basis.
Yeah, no, as they say, often what gets talked about gets done, and certainly what gets talked about gets done on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to talk about the right things on a consistent basis, and on that consistency and sustainability. So in your business, what would you say sustainable home care looks like in the next 5-10 years? Because obviously the business landscape's changing, the aged care sector is changing, as you identified earlier. So what does that look like? The future, the next 5-10 years, look like to you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there's some really fun stuff happening with our space. So, I mean, even as simple as how care workers commute from one place to the next, historically it's been get in the car, bang out lots of diesel or petrol and move to the next location. I think a simple shift like e-bikes and scooters and so on makes the whole a world of change from that angle. I also think that, and this sounds really minimal, but actually it's a big deal within the sector. The sector has been moving towards a paperless journey. I mean, we are paperless at Walfinch, and I think that alone, when you think about the fact that an established franchisor might have 200 plus locations that has maybe 30 to 70 people working in any one of those locations, and that's a lot of paper floating about. Yes, also trees and so on. So I think really simple things, we're talking about getting sort of recycled uniforms and kind of organic stuff and all of this. And I think there's a real kind of interesting piece on what does the merch look like. Is that made from sustainable materials and so on? And it's really then just in what is the education that we're doing, how are we supporting older people with something as easy as kind of just draft proofing to reduce the levels of energy and so on. But we're getting people that are far more nuanced working within the sector that are helping to advise that and helping to deliver that.
And if there a change between care homes and home care, and have you seen that change since you've been in there? And do you think that's going to change even further as you move forward?
There's a lot of changes there. What are we specifically talking about from a business perspective?
No, just from a societal perspective. Are people moving more towards home care, or are they still using a lot of home care homes, etc.?
Yeah, I think that home care has become more and more of a go-to product. And I think over the next 10 years, what we'll see is home care morphing more into home healthcare. And effectively what that means is that we'll be doing a lot of that ICU unit type stuff at home. I mean, at Walfinch, we do a little bit of that. It's not our bread and butter type of work, but I do think that if I fast forward 10, 15 years from today, that will be a big deal. We'll be offsetting the pressures of hospitals and so on as a result of it as well.
Yeah, and it's something that's sorely needed. The NHS is streaking at every seam, and actually, some people don't want to put their parents or any relatives into a care home. Actually, so I think that's probably why I would agree that the home care is something that people are probably going to be doing more and more. Now, as you said, the home health care, and I think there is lots of studies about actually if you're treating people in the home, actually they often do better than when they're in a hospital. I mean, I personally can't, anytime I go in the hospital, even if I'm 100% healthy, I always feel a bit nauseous, or I never feel great when I'm in the hospital. So being sick and in the hospital, I don't think is always the best environment, to be honest.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that that's where you think the direction is starting to move towards, actually.
I do truly. I think that's...
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, I'm just saying, I think that really, there is no other option, really, when you think about it. The hospitals can't cope with the supply of people. Nursing homes, again, there's a supply side issue. Frankly, I think, domiciliary and home care is really where people want to be. Most people want to be where they've kind of grown old, as opposed to going to anything else of any sort of institution.
Yeah, no, I think that it's just a human instinct, isn't it? Really. So yeah, just bringing it slightly back to the business. If someone, and I'm sure lots of people do come to you, and someone's running a business, to the CEO or the founder, and they're trying to grow their business, and the basis saying, look, I really have a purpose, and I really want to make sure I grow this business, but I don't want to lose as we grow the soul of what made me get into this business in the first place. What advice would you have for that person? If you could give them 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of advice to say, well, make sure you do these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think my 2 big things really would be, number one, what is that soul? define it, write it down. So let's talk about what we don't want to lose, because maybe you're the only one that knows, and maybe it's the best kept secret in your business. So let's really talk about it, write it down, talk about it, get it out there. And number two, I would say that when we think about not losing that kind of momentum and energy within a business, I think what are the processes? Is everything process driven? So how do I answer the call when there's a disgruntled employee or a client? How do I deal with that? Is there something, literally a written process about, well, step one, say this, step two, do that, ascertain this, write it here, then this happens. And actually, whatever we can make a process, we can then teach that to anybody within the organization at that point.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? Because it's about reproducibility and being able to replicate, isn't it? And I think the more you write stuff down, especially processes which are critical to your soul, then when people come in, they're almost like, I'm not going to say indoctrinated, but they're almost just pushed into that. Actually, this is how we do it at Walfinch. This is how we do it in this company. And then that then becomes part of your just general business process. So I think that's really, really good advice. And then it's kind of a similar question, but because this is my last question actually. So if somebody was watching this and they decided, I'm going to fast forward through loads of stuff and I'm just going to listen to the end. I don't think that'll happen, but just in case it did, if there's one thing that you'd say, well, I want to make sure that this is the only thing that if you get nothing else, this is what you need to know about balancing mission and margins.
I am a big believer in just doing the work. And I think that we don't talk about it enough. And I think certainly in the UK, I don't think we talk about it enough. It's kind of feels like a very kind of American concept of really putting a shift in. But I think, nothing happens in life for free. Nothing happens without doing the work. Nothing happens without some sleepless nights. If you want to create something amazing, be prepared to do the work. And if you're not going to do the work, then just move on to the next thing, because actually it's just not for you. And I think the thing that I really want everyone to really get behind is understanding, do the work, figure out what that work is, and then double down on that. What is everyone else not doing? What am I really interested in? And just double down.
I think that's a perfect place actually on which to end. Just do the work. It's simple, but often the simplest things are the best things and the most impactful, actually. Because I think there was a video I watched, I don't know if you've seen, it's called Just Do the Thing, which is similar to what you're saying. And it's like a 30-second clip, and it just says, just do the thing. Don't talk about doing the thing. Don't have meetings about doing the thing. Don't, procrastinate. Just go and do the thing. And I think that's pretty much what you're saying. And it's pretty much what you've been saying all the way through. All the things you've talked about. And not the EOS is about getting stuff done. So I really appreciate you coming on, Amrit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on the Hands On Business podcast. No, my pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. And don't forget to pick up the show notes over at thesalesaccelerationformula.com/podcast/show-notes. You'll also find an option to subscribe to our mailing list so that you can get notes for every single episode straight to your inbox. While you're at it, don't forget to tune in to next week's episode of my new 5 in 5 series, where I share 5 actionable takeaways in just 5 minutes from this episode, which will help you supercharge your business growth. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who might find it valuable. Most importantly, keep the feedback coming so we can keep improving and bringing you more of what you love. Thank you very much for tuning in. And remember, keep listening, keep growing, and keep thriving.